WWE Champion, lovely bloke, 1/3 of one of WWE's greatest ever trio, outstanding babyface. Kofi Kingston is many, many things, but above all else, the 37-year-old is the owner of a really, really weird chest. I mean, I can't really say that much because I look like a deflated whoopee cushion when my top is off, but Kofi's chest has been going concave for the best part of a decade, and the man himself has a very simple explanation for what happened. When asked about why his chest quote-unquote looks like it collapsed on July 3rd, 2019, he tweeted, "Big Show chopped me in 2009 and it hasn't been the same since." Aww. Now, Kofi is quite obviously taking the piss here, but professional wrestling definitely changes the bodies of its participants. It takes athletes in as fresh potatoes and spits them out as rotten, lumpy mash. Few other sports generate this level of wear and tear, and taking part in it leaves a big mark on one's body. Now, there are many, many more than I'm about to list, of course, but each of the names within suffered for their art. I'm Andy for WhatCulture Wrestling, and here are 10 ways wrestlers' bodies changed forever because of wrestling. Number 2. Shawn Michaels' lazy eye. While Shawn Michaels' gammy eye isn't necessarily the first thing you notice about the Heartbreak Kid, particularly now that he's bald as a vulture, it's clearly there. The culprit? Kane, unfortunately. Although Glenn Jacobs is widely regarded as one of the safest workers ever, a bad bump taken by Shawn during their showdown at Unforgiven 2004 saw HBK leave the building with the problem. It became increasingly noticeable in the years that followed, though the eye injury itself wasn't severe enough to necessitate any time off at the time. The injury is often attributed to Chris Jericho after an angle ran during their wonderful feud in 2018. It saw HBK suffer a supposed detached retina at Y2J's hands. But guess what? That was all kayfabe. Blame Kane for a lot of things, but mostly this. Number 9. DDP's Face. While Diamond Dallas Page perhaps didn't have the WWE run he might have wanted after his fairy tale rise to the top of WCW in the 90s, his commitment to his life coach bit after being a really creepy stalker for a while can't be denied. The shark well and truly jumped after getting beaten by The Undertaker's wife, Sarah. DDP needed something new. He disappeared for a while, eventually returning with a new motivational speaker gimmick that brought a new catchphrase, over-the-top positivity, and a big, cheesy grin. To ensure he looked the part, Page had his face lifted and his teeth whitened to such an extent that they should have come with a UV ray warning, bless him, and it worked. The new DDP looked every bit the snake oil salesman he was now playing on TV. Number 8. Junko Sabu's torso. Deathmatch wrestling is a niche within a niche. A subgenre reserved for only those with the strongest stomachs and wills to match, it is, to the untrained viewer, an artless execution of the sport, serving only to shock and awe. Of course, this is nonsense, it's way too reductive to dismiss a whole style of wrestling like that, but if you can watch this stuff, you're a stronger man than me. I'm a wimp, and I can't handle the gore. These guys legitimately sliced themselves up, and while we could have put dozens of different wrestlers in this spot, few have had their skin torn to shreds like Japan's crazy monkey, Junko Sabu. The man's torso is, let's be honest, repulsive. His back and chest are so torn up he makes Sabu look like Rick the Model Martel, with 20 plus years of barbed wire, razors, light tubes and scissor boards leaving many a mark. Number 7. Abdullah the Butcher's Head. Blading has largely gone the way of the dodo in mainstream professional wrestling, and hardcore wrestling Madman Abdullah the Butcher's Head is what happens when a wrestler blades too deep and too often. Drawing colour was a huge part of his unpredictable act, and if he was going to make a living carving men up with his trademark fork, he was going to have to take his fair share of licks himself. Thus, he ended up with a napper that looks like a letter rack. Mick Foley once claimed that the divots in Abby's skin were so deep that the madman from the Sudan can hold gambling chips inside them. Not a great look now that he's 78 years old, but the scars certainly add to the Butcher's mystique. Number 6. Bruno Sammartino's cauliflower ears. If neglected, cauliflower ear can leave a person with a grotesque or unsightly lug, or maybe even two, if you're unlucky, and Bruno Sammartino was pro wrestling's foremost example. The problem arises when one's ears are struck or experience some other form of trauma. Blood clots or other buildups of fluid can then form beneath the skin, and they separate the cartilage from the connective tissue that provides it with its nutrients. What happens then is it dies, and a permanent hematoma can leave the ear permanently deformed and swollen. Basically, it looks really gross. The cauliflower ears really are the worst. That's what Bruno told the Washington Post in 1980, and he continued, "There's nothing, no broken bone, no busted nose, as painful. Even walking down the street, the breeze that passes causes excruciating pain." It's a real shame that Bruno had to suffer through this nasty condition, but it's not like having cauliflower ears hindered his career in any way outside the obvious pain. Poor fella. Number 5. Gangrel's fangs. Everybody's preferred wrestling vampire and a huge sentimental favourite among the WhatCulture wrestling team, Gangrel and his fangs just aren't for show. After all, one doesn't simply fang and bang without the right kind of gnashers. The Big G had his vampiric fangs implanted into his gums early into his run as Gangrel. While the specific date isn't clear, he went all in to ensure his daft character would look as convincing as possible, though one can only imagine the kind of nightmares he has had eating food since making this weird dental request. Though his peak run came almost 20 years ago, Gangrel and his pointy twofers are still running wild on the indie scene today. A 2018 MLW match with the former Simon Gotch finished via DQ when the 49-year-old sunk his fangs into his opponent's arms. Basically, he's still bloody mint. Number 4. Kurt Angle's arms. That Kurt Angle was able to maintain a high-level professional wrestling career for over 2 decades is remarkable, considering the damage done to his body before and during his run. The broken freaking neck around which Kurt based so many of his promos and a lot of his character was a hindrance beyond the obvious physical impact, as, like many before him, he suffered noticeable muscle atrophy whenever further complications arose, and it was particularly noticeable when he was in TNA. In 2007 and 2008, Angle's arm muscles had clearly degenerated. This was almost certainly a byproduct of his inability to build mass, sustain mass, and work out to the full extent when his neck was giving him problems, with the breakage restricting the blood flow to his triceps. As a result of this, Kurt's arms almost appeared shrunken, with the Olympic hero forced to work them out twice a week in order to boost their appearance, though he was always swimming against the atrophied tide. Number 3. The Undertaker's hips. WrestleMania 33 was supposed to be it for The Undertaker, and news that he checked into a New York facility for major hip surgery a few weeks after the show strengthened all those retirement rumours. The dead man was going in for an overdue hip replacement. He'd been living with the pain for years, and the procedure was much needed, but it didn't lead to the end of his in-ring career. While it took a full year before Taker would wrestle again, he has never been able to walk away from the square circle entirely, even when his body broke down even more and his movements are more stunted than ever. It's a real shame that this beloved legend felt the need to put his body through such hell for our entertainment. Here's hoping he lets himself rest before too long. Number 2. Hulk Hogan's height. For evidence of Hulk Hogan's height loss, compare any image of the Hulkster's heyday to how he looks in 2019. Hogan clearly isn't the 6'8" man mountain he was back in the day. And Hulk has admitted as much himself. In a 2005 interview, he claimed that while he used to be taller, knee, neck, and back surgeries had left him somewhere around the 6'4" mark. Now he's still a big dude, but several decades of hitting a finishing move that involves high-impact spinal compression had left him physically shorter. So when the big leg drops, not only does the crowd pop, but Hogan's back slops? I don't know, lads, I ran out of ops. But Hogan isn't the only wrestler to lose height as a result of a grueling wrestling career. Rowdy Roddy Piper suffered an even more noticeable decline, losing somewhere between 5 and 6 inches through his compacted spine and other surgeries, having been billed at 6'2" early in his career before coming in at approximately 5'9" at the time of his passing. And number 1, Mick Foley's everything? Here's a quick list of some of the worst ways that pro wrestling has changed Mick Foley's body. 1986, broken jaw. 1989 to 1998, 4 front teeth, gone. 1993, 2 broken noses. Then, he had 2/3 of his ear torn off when his head got caught in the ropes while wrestling Vader. 1995, 2nd-degree burns to his shoulder and arms. 1998, suffered a concussion, dislocated his jaw, bruised a kidney, and put a hole in his goddamn mouth after falling from Hell in a Cell. And throughout his career, he's got over 300 stitches to his arms, head, eyebrows, hands, shin, cheek, and lip throughout his career. And that's just the tip of the iceberg. Foley suffered many, many more injuries throughout his time in the ring, and it's hard to imagine that the sport has ravaged many bodies quite like his. The man's physical form is a roadmap of battle scars. He is the most selfless wrestler of all time. So that's our list, but can you think of any others? Please let us know down in the comments section below. Don't forget to like, share and subscribe, then follow us on Twitter at WhatCulture WWE and myself at Andy H. Murray. Bye!